Welcome. It's been a interesting ride so far. I've now hit my 3 month mark with my Prusa i3 Mark III, and when I originally was going to do a review, I did a final thoughts after the build, but I wanted to wait for about a month of printing. After the month, I just didn't feel that things were stable enough to actually give a good, fair review because I think it would have came across rather negative in light of a bunch of things going on. Not issues by any means, but there was some inconsistencies, we'll call it. So I waited. I decided to get a lot of prints through. I wanted to be able to have a nice video of showing the hundreds and hundreds of hours of printing I've gone through it. But unfortunately, there's no data. But that's a different story. So anyways, stick around. Let's see what my final thoughts were on and are on the Prusa Mark III. And yeah, stick around. I'm Ron, and this is my place. The first thing I want to talk about is no matter how I do this review, it's going to come across good and bad. So I'm just going to tell you what my true thoughts are, and it'll be interesting to see what everybody's thoughts about my thoughts are. So to get it out of the way, I would definitely not call myself a Prusa fanboy, but I am a huge fan. It's by far my favorite printer, and I would never want to give it back. So that's kind of where their starting ground. I wanted to love this printer, and I like it a whole lot, but I wouldn't say I love it. I'm currently running, just to get it out of the way, the 2.1.4 drivers. I made notes so I could try and make sure I get all the data right. The firmware is 3.1.3, March 8th. It's, in other words, both of them are the latest releases that are there. I ordered really literally within 30 minutes of the release and got it on December 9th is when I received my printer. And the build went fine. Everything went great. I'm not going to talk about any of that because I have videos for it. You can check them out. I'll try and get some links flying around for those reviews and builds. This one specifically, just kind of what are my thoughts 3 months fast forwarded. So what I think I'm going to do is we're going to talk about from the top down. And I think that'll be kind of the easiest way to go through everything. So to start off the top up here, the spool holder is better from what I understand. I don't have a Mark IIs, but it's floppy. I'm not a fan of it. I keep meaning to go back and get something that'll put like a stabilizer or something. The heavier rolls of filament definitely make this thing flop around. Never caused a problem, but just kind of weird. Anyway, something eventually I'm going to end up changing. The rest of it up here is actually good. I didn't have any major problems. If we come down a ways, you can see here, this was the X gantry piece that when I originally put my printer together, it had failed. There was actually some broken spots, and this is the original design. I ended up reprinting it while I was waiting on some parts, and I've never decided to go back in. Now, other than just the way it was made, the other piece of it is it was too small, too big, and the linear bearings that are in here just would fall down. They were flopping around and rattling. It was just annoying and bad prints, and so this piece was just really bad. But I printed it out in PETG, and it's been fine. I've got a new one from Support. For that note, Support has been flawless and awesome. My only wish is that I wish I wouldn't have had to use them a number of times that I did. But every time I did contact them, they were very forthcoming, never questioned anything. The power supply was the only thing that had the biggest question, and that was just while they were trying to get to the bottom of the problems. So anyway, so there's that. The extruder was a pain in the butt to put together. I covered that in the review. Since then, I haven't really had any major problems until very recently when my part fan died. It still operates, but the RPM sensing doesn't work. So for the last week, I've had to be running without the RPM sensing. Not a big deal, but I just wanted to bring up that that is a current failure. I contacted support. They didn't seem to have any problems with it. I ended up telling them that I checked the wiring and I received the connector, and then I swapped the Noctua with this one just to verify it spun up and read, yada yada. So they'll send that. I'll probably get that sometime next week. And then I'll deal with putting it in. I don't know. I'm not looking forward to that because putting this together and the wiring was just a nightmare. I'm just not a fan of that part of the build. But other than that, nothing else really up here. The only issues I had, well, let's talk about the filament sensor. The filament sensor's okay. When it was sold, obviously the big selling point was not only was it filament detection, but it was also going to detect jams. That didn't work. I don't think it'll ever work. Its sensitivity that it needs to detect that was just causing too many problems with too many different types of filaments. In all the different revs of firmware, they went from it worked great to tons of false detects back to it seems to be working just fine now, but it does not detect jams. It may eventually detect jams, but I've had it print in midair 2, 3, 4 times. Every time it takes half an inch to an inch of print before it finally realizes that there's no filament flowing, and that's basically when it jams up. And I think it's detecting the movement because it's trying to push the filament in and then it pops back out. And it's not able to see the reverse. So it sees that it's moving through. Again, works great. I've never had it fail for when I ran out of filament. And I've done a number of prints with it running out. So as filament detection, it works great. Nozzle clogs, never going to happen. What else to talk about? Okay, so moving down, as you get down into the power supply. The power supply, when I first got it, I'm in North America, so the 110, I had the clicking that everybody talks about. Still a big controversy. I personally work in electronics, am not worried about it. It's just an electrical noise. It's irritating a little bit because it's so quiet. So that's why you hear it. I have other printers, other power supplies, they don't do it. Whatever. When I had to get this one replaced, because originally I was one of the first that complained about the rattling power supply, not the clicking, but the rattling. And there's a piece of plastic board that was in here, and it just was horrible. And I ended up, sent me this power supply, and it doesn't rattle, and the clicking is like 1/8 of what the old one was. So I'm not complaining. Everything there's working fine. Not a problem. If it ever became a problem, I'd just replace the power supply with something else. But it was an issue, did cause some problems. So getting into the power detection, have never seriously had a problem with it. I've lost power a couple times. It did indeed save prints. I've never had that part of it fail. I did struggle with the testing at the beginning a little bit, but that was because of the way I was testing it. But yeah, so that is definitely a feature that was sold that works just like they claimed that it should. The main frame of the printer, I would never complain about. It seems to be rock solid. All this seems to be sturdy. The Z-rods and lead screws all worked fine. When I first got it, it was really, really dry. So I ended up getting some, lube on it. And once I did that, everything went away. It didn't change the print, but it was like this random odd squeaking. So that all went away. There's still, I think, something going on with the way these parts are. There's been some remodifications of parts. I have to go back in someday if I have to rip this thing apart and probably reprint out with all their latest and greatest. I've never done anything beyond having to put this part in, which was way at the beginning. So then getting down into the board, I haven't had any problems with it at all. The main board's been solid as a rock, no glitches. Possibly a bit of noise, or how do I even want to describe it? It seems, I don't know if it's a grounding thing or what, but I live up here in the wonderful north, and the air is really dry, and I get static electricity. And if I actually touch the frame, it raises the whole thing up, and I see the bed or the display will go all garbled and look all strange. Don't know exactly what that is. It's obviously a ground loop somewhere that the static zap is getting into the electronics, the display or the board. The talking about, I guess, firmware, dealing with that. The firmware, there's been so many revisions. They've done a whole lot of work. I think currently we're still not using linear advance, which they said it was messing up the print qualities. There's been just so many changes with all the different features dealing with skips and the way the filament sensor, which has gotten the most work and dealing with. They've made some ramp up changes trying to help with the clicking and just a whole bunch of other miscellaneous things. Some were good firmware updates, some were less good. Every one of them, if it went bad, they ended up correcting the stuff after the fact. They updated. I mean, they're doing good. That's what I love about Prusa. Yes, it's not a perfect printer, but they're trying to fix everything. So I guarantee you they want to have a good operating printer more than we do. So that part of it, props to them again, supporting Prusa. They're doing great. Never had any belt issues. I haven't had any tension problems. Never really had any sensor issues whatsoever. Fan cooling, I did not really believe it was going to be that good at first, but it turns out it's doing really well. Yeah, that's pretty much all I've got on that. So now we get down to the bed. I don't even need to say much about it. It's just amazing. Flex systems are the way to go. The only complaint I have is that we don't have the powder-coated PEI sheet. Eventually that's going to come out, maybe, if they can get through the manufacturing process. In the meantime, I mean, I have this. I'm still printing on the first side of it. I've got no problems. I throw a little acetone on it every so often to kind of refresh it. Things stick well. I've got no problems. I absolutely love flex systems. I did play in with the rails. At first, I had a couple bad linear bearings, so I tried to switch over to IGUS bearings. That didn't go so well for me. Others did. Don't yell at me. I just didn't like them. Went back to linears that I bought rather than making Prusa ship them over. And that seems to have fixed that issue because the IGUS started sticking on me. And that gets me to what happens when you stick. Well, you get layer shifts. Well, I'm not a huge fan of the trinamic drivers. Do they stop crash detection? Stop the shifts due to a big smash into a part? Yes. That's what they're claiming that it is all it'll do now. And if that's the case, absolutely does that wonderfully. Not that it's happened that many times for me, but I have personally seen it happen. It worked just fine. Having said that, I've had probably a dozen layer shifts caused by other different things. One of which was bearing issues that I was having. So even though it would, as it was going back, it would get more and more tension until eventually the motor would skip, but the drivers never actually noticed that. Now, this isn't a review on those. I'm sure there's a million reasons why. I'm just telling you what my experiences are. It works a little bit, and there's a lot of it that didn't work. But it does indeed stop. If you stop it or just abruptly hit the head, it will actually stop. It'll rehome itself and continue on. It worked a few times, but I've got way more layer shifts than I had the ones that it detected. That's all I can say. What else? The getting into the display. I mean, everybody knows about the displays. It's just what they are. There is no issues whatsoever down here. I've had no problems with the SD card. At first, when we're talking about the box in there, I bought a Raspberry Pi W or the Zero or whatever to use Octo Print on it built in. But because it had to be put in after, basically, I didn't want to put it in right away because it was just tons of issues and huge problems, and it wasn't worth it. So I printed it just with the SD card for the longest time. And I just haven't had the gumption to rip the board out and put in the pie, because you have to put the pie in from the back side and then put everything back in. And I didn't see the major point. I run a Raspberry Pi 3 externally with the Raspberry Pi camera, and it works just fine. I mean, I don't see the point. So I've never bothered to go back in and actually put it in there. So I can't talk to that, but I know a lot of people have had pretty good luck now. Talking Octo Print, at the beginning, it was really, really bad. Not Octo Print, but the way it worked with Prusa. There were just tons. Not even going to get into it. You couldn't print. It was completely unusable for quite a while. Seems to work fine now. I've been using Octo Print now for at least a month, maybe a month and a half, exclusively. I don't print with the SD card at all. Never do with any of my printers, so I was very happy to get back to that. Seems to be working fine, no issues. They all worked well together. Yeah, that was pretty much it. I mean, the actual quality of prints, I don't need to talk about it. I mean, I've got tons of prints that all printed off the Mark III. I've got a lot of videos you can watch if you want to see the different types of prints that I was doing. Never had major problems with it. There's some ringing that I'm not a super fan of, but it's nothing horrible by any means. Finish, layer heights, consistencies, all absolutely stellar. Literally, for the most part, it's literally a printer that you can load the SD, start the print, and walk away. I rarely watch it put down the first layer. I just keep a clean bed all the time, avoid touching with my fingers, wipe it with ISO before I print. Every so often, I hit it with a little acetone. Rarely do I have a problem whatsoever. I did have a little bit of an issue once upon a time with the belt. It ended up getting somehow or another, because when you put these in, when you do your build, you don't tighten these screws all the way. You're using it as kind of belt tension. And at one point I had it, they vibrated out or something. It was really bizarre. So my belt got really loose. Fixed it, and it's never been a problem again. In the back here, this is the old style, and it's got the plastic wrap around with the nylon filament inside. I guess they've changed that now, and they're starting to do the cloth thing. It must have been putting too much pressure on this, causing some layer shifts. Maybe partially what I was seeing. I just haven't swapped it out yet. So at some point I'll probably do that when I get the fan and have to rip this thing apart anyways. Maybe I'll kind of update that. So that was pretty much it. I mean, we've talked about all the pieces and all the final electronic gizmos that they've put in. I guess my thoughts on where this stands is it's a Prusa. I mean, it's on the cutting edge. They are reaching out. They're going beyond what most people do. Yeah, they're going to stumble a little bit. I mean, anytime you're innovative, you're going to actually have issues with the software. In this case, they're recovering on all of them. Yes, they've had to backtrack a little bit, like with the firmware, with the filament sensor on what the capabilities are. But that's just technology. It's just the way it is. I don't really have a problem with that. So do I absolutely love it beyond anything else? I don't think so, but I mean, it's just a printer. I do like it a lot. It's by far my favorite printer. Am I going to compare it to a CR10? They're not the same. You really can't. They do two different kind of things, and I look at them kind of different. I do trust my CR10 now as much as I trust the Prusa. In fact, I occasionally find myself printing on my CR10 instead of the Prusa. But it's not really a slam against it. It's really about the fact it was my first printer. And I've put quite a bit of work and effort into it, and it's finally printing well, and I just like using it. But usually if I'm printing a handful of things, I'll have both printers going. Rarely do I have problems. So yeah, I don't really have any other things to say about it. So after 3 months, I like it. Do I recommend it? Absolutely. Is it going to be a flawless experience for you? Probably not, especially if you get the kit. But that's the fun. I mean, if you get into this hobby at this stage of the game, to have a flawless experience, that you don't have any work to do, I think 3D printing may not be the best hobby for you. One of the enjoyable aspects of this hobby is the tinkering, is kind of playing around. Now, I'm not saying that you want to get a printer that all you have to do is work on it. That's just annoying. But sometimes little things happen. I haven't had to do much at all with this one, though. I mean, it's just little things that happened and some little frustrations that I had to work through. But for the most part, I mean, it's done what it's supposed to do. It prints well, it's advanced, it does awesome things, and it's got awesome features. So, yeah. Am I a fanboy? No. Am I a big fan? Absolutely. Do I recommend the Mark III? Without a doubt. Is it going to be flawless? Probably not. It is what it is. So there you go. Those are my thoughts for after 3 months. I don't really know what else to say. I mean, I'm not going to repeat the same things everybody else says. I can't think of anything else I didn't say. I printed everything from ABS to PETG to PLA and some bizarre stuff from the maker box. Oh, I did install a ruby nozzle on it as well. I did that about halfway through this last 3 months and works great. It allows me to print breaks of filaments without any problems, so that's a good thing. That's it. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you got something out of it, and have a great night and print everything you can.